Wow.
And his conviction and Rick's conviction was that if you can play rhythm, you can play with anybody.
I can see that for sure.
And so anyway, that was something that advanced my guitar playing considerably after he left, because I didn't really know anything about how to play like funk or R&B or how how important the footwork is to that orientation of more American roots music.
Okay.
So I started listening more acutely to that stuff, and it wasn't that it was just that I immediately got into Al Green, but it was like, I was starting to like look more acutely at Nile Rodgers and look more acutely at stuff that I'd already heard growing up, but didn't understand how it was rendered on guitar.
Right.
And so I got into, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On album. I got into the Stevie Wonder's Fulfilling This First Finale album. I got into like just so many things that were taking me deeper and deeper into history, and ended up influencing the My Love, Sex, and Spirit record, and then also the Geffen record too.
And it's true, they wanna try to take much more than my time. In my state of mind, I know I got so much to answer.
So how did the Pleasure Club album become Pleasure Club the band?
Well, when I'd gotten dropped by Geffen, we were able to make the record we wanted to make. And most major labels will let you do that at least once. But then they kind of want to levy influence, or kind of want to make sure that this goes commercial. And I wanted it to be commercial too as well, but I kind of had my own ideas about that, and they were not identical to others' ideas about that.
Right.
But when we went to, at some point, Geffen was no longer Geffen. Geffen was at Interscope Records. Interscope's, I'd been through a handful of A&Rs from the time I was with Geffen through Interscope and all of that. And we had a good guy at Interscope, but then at some point, Jordan Schur came in, and he just was I'm not feeling this. And so we were dropped.
Wow.
And Grant and I were talking, and neither of us felt like we were really done yet. And we were both very, very interested in doing something that was compelling and interesting. And initially it was kind of like James Hall and the Pleasure Club. And that was kind of the tail end of the Geffen years.
Okay.
Then I introduced Grant to Jay Joyce and Mike Jerome. And then we had a guitar player working with us for a while named Mike Graff. But it was Mark Huttner, who had a band called Twig in Los Angeles, that really, really just, I said to Grant, he's wild. He's our guitarist. And so we made the appeal to him. And he had kind of tried out working with me before, but it was different. It was as if, and he loved the Geffen record, but he was being so deferential to me that we were never going to get a good take out of him.
Oh, okay.
So it was only when he was really kind of free to be wild that we were going to get like really great performances out of Mark. And so he joined the band. And when that happened, we knew that we had something special. We knew we had the visceral impact of Birthday Party with some of the kind of psychedelic of Spaceman 3, and we had something, a really, really good mix of content and influence. And, we just kind of became an original statement. I mean, that band still, I think, exists as an original statement just based on its chemistry alone, because no one plays the drums like Michael Jerome. No one. And then when Michael Jerome sings with me, that blend is a particular thing too as well.
Right. Sure.
When Grant plays bass, but no one plays bass like Grant does.
Yeah.
He is not the notiest player ever, but he is probably one of the most convicted players, one of the most convincing players ever, for bass being an important role in good rock music. And then Mark is very experimental with his playing. He loves the big hollow bodies. He loves X. He loves a lot of like noise, but he is just a great, great player, really inspired and really interesting player. And it was funny. I remember one time when we were at rehearsal space, and he's just like, "So you play a Strat?" I said, "Yeah, I play a Strat." And he's just like, "I never pictured you playing a Strat." I said, "Well, what do you picture me playing?" He's like, "Well, there's hollow bodies." I say, "Well, the hollow body was stolen." But it is true that, like, you know, his context was, you know, one thing on Geffen and everything. But it doesn't matter what you're playing. But there are certain things that we can kind of render certain ideas with. And so, like, when it came to doing Shout Your Automatic, a song like that, I was playing the riff out initially for the automatic part of the song. I was playing that out on Strat. That's where the comment came in. and you know, and like I you know, I still like Strats, even though, you know, a lot of people associate him with, you know, Eric Clapton and Eric Johnson and
Right.
Stevie Ray Vaughan and all.
Yeah.
Yet I still think that they have a special thing that they can do. I think that they're a special, really special instrument.
Oh, for sure.
But they're not cheap anymore because we have so many famous Strat players that are dead now.
Yeah.
But the Strat killed them.
I don't think they did.
I don't think it killed him. Yeah. But it's funny, like, because Mark, his interpretation of Pleasure Club, he brought a lot to the table. You know, a lot of stuff that I had really heard that he brought to the table. But it's funny, too, as well. There was also interesting blends, too, because there'd be like a record that, you know, we were digging, that Grant and me had dug for years that Mark had never heard before, you know. Okay. And then there'd be another record that I'd never heard, or maybe actually I had heard. There's a record called Eric Burdon Sings the Hits of the Animals or something like that. And it's a rethinking of all of the 60s Animal hits and a few others, Nights in White Satin among them. But it's a really cool sounding record because it was done with, you know, studio musicians in 1978. And so it doesn't sound like 60s Animals. It sounds like Animals with the, you know, the Emotional Rescue Band or the Miss You, you know, the Some Girls Band from Rolling Stone. It's got the phaser, flanger, and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's its own color. Alice Cooper. Some of the stuff sounds like Alice Cooper. It's just a wild mix of good songs. Just they've done it differently with that album, and that Grant and me had already heard that, and then Mark said, "Have you heard this?" And it was a rare album to his credit, but we had, you know, we already loved it. We were already very familiar with it. So
there was a pretty sizable gap between the Geffen album and then Pleasure Club the band, and again, after the second Pleasure Club album, between that and what came next, which was, I think, the Futura Bold came next after Pleasure Club, right? In both of those instances, I mean, are you still out playing music, or did you put it down again for a little bit? Or
no, I was out playing music and doing stuff, but also, you know, between the Geffen records, we reached kind of the end of the touring cycle for that. My son was born in January of 1997.
Okay.
So that was starting a process in my life that was important to me. And, you know, in some respects, being on Geffen and not having sold a lot of records meant that, you know, I was able to spend a lot of time with him.
Right.
And play with him and see him grow and care for him. And so I stayed home with him a good while. And then when Pleasure Club started recording around 2000, 2001 for the Here Comes the Trick record.
I was born into a terminal dive. You won't see me waiting for my moment to arrive. I'm gonna wade into the water with my eyes upon the sun, with permanent solutions and flashes from a gun. Kick it over children before the serpents flood your mind. Move faster, baby. You don't want to let the rhythm grind.
It did take some time to both get the songs together. I mean, I remember even going out to demo with the Geffen band at Mike Campbell's studio and playing with P.W. Long's Real Foot, and talking with Mac McNeely about having kids and being married and all of that. And, and he's like, "How's it going?" I said, "I'm tired."
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, you should be."
Yeah.
I said, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I've got two. I think my wife wants to have another one." And I said, "Wow." He says, "But," I said, "When does it get easier?" He says, "Right at about a year." I said, "Really?" But yeah. And sure enough, true to form, it got easier right at about a year. Your son's starting to get independent, and then also my expectations over this life being a part of my life, this new life being a part of my life, I acclimated to it because you've already been through a January before.
Right.
So this is January, second time around. And he's, you know, and starting to play more and starting to, you know, interact more. And so there's kind of a really cool thing that happens across the years. They get easier as you go, you know, in a certain regard.
Yeah, I agree. And it's an amazing thing to watch. It's
an amazing thing to watch, you know. And so I was very, very lucky to have not been famous or to be, you know, touring all the festivals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I remember sometime around there, probably 1998, 1999, seeing Chris Cornell, not seeing him in person. I've only seen them play just a handful of times, but seeing film of him playing the European festivals, and Black Hole Sun was out, and it had really had a great showing at the charts. And but he looked so disconnected from that and so unhappy doing it. And I mean, I understood it, even though I wasn't experiencing it myself, but I understood how it can be terrible when you're in a band. It can be just terrible. And a lot of that is, like, you know, mental stuff. And
well, like, as you know, if you're out on tour and you have kids, it's not like a day job where you can go home and you see your kids at the end of the night. You know, you're away from weeks and months at a time. It's just, I can only imagine how difficult that's got to be.
Yeah, no, especially for people that are really, you know, passionate about having their kids. You know, and being with their kids. It's just such a crazy disconnect.
Oh, God,
and you know, it's not lost on me that how pilots and people that are in the flight industry can end up, you know, with some pretty formidable addictions because they're just separated from the ones they love so much of their work week and their lives.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they're comped meals at the hotel, you know, they get cheap rooms or comped rooms at the hotels, and they you know, and they're kind of just away from their family. Comp drink and food. And
if you love your family, if that's where you want to be, then you're doing things that maybe to kind of get your mind off of the pain that you're in. So I can totally understand how bad things can happen to some good people like that.
Yeah, that's a tough aspect of the music life, and especially like if things are going well on the road too, like and you know, you're ascending and you're putting money away and all this kind of good stuff, and yet you're just further and further away from your family.
Yeah. And just thinking about the things you're missing, you know, you're making a great living possibly, but you're missing first steps, first words, first it'll never come back.
Yeah. And I was lucky that I was able to be around for that.
Yeah.
And, and I don't know how that could have happened with things working out the way that I had hoped that they would have.
Right.
You know, I make no assumptions that PJ Harvey has an easier Monday than I had today.
Right.
You know, I've learned that life is tough no matter who you are, and that there's, you know, certain obstacles and indignities that are part of the experience of having a Monday.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. And then in the end, we're all only here for a limited amount of time. You know, unfortunately, we just lost Charlie Watts and a few other people recently. So, you know, you can't take the money with you. It's a balancing act, I'm sure, for people. I've never had to do it, but I can imagine how difficult it's got to be.
It's difficult, and yet at the same time, you're in the enviable position to have a successful tour sometimes. So I'm not certain that rock and roll is a young man's game. I'm fairly certain that it's for people that have got some degree of maturity and some degree of perspective. You know, for me to be, you know, trying to utilize or leverage social media so I could be more popular and maybe sell more records or something like that, or get more likes or more hits or more followers. It doesn't seem to be a whole lot that I'm interested in right now.
Right.
In regard to the record business. I know that social media is controlling the record business, but if I don't have to play the game that way, I'm probably happier and better off.
Yeah. Well, that's also, like you said, a level of maturity that maybe a younger artist doesn't have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
you know, let's not forget, like, you know, Mark Sandman was putting out his finest work with morphine in his 50s, early 50s.
Very true.
So it doesn't mean that, you know, what he did before that was not good. It just meant that it took a while for the audience and the vision to connect.
Yeah. How did the Futura Bold come about? Because that's a completely different band.
It is. And
sound.
It doesn't matter who you think you are. I'm getting cash off this whole guitar. I'm riding high to hear my scars. So drop your needles on the shooting star. On the shooting star. When I get home tonight, I know that
August 29th, 2005, myself, my wife and my son were in Hurricane Katrina, and we had evacuated to Memphis, and we weren't really certain where we were going to go.
Okay.
We were in the enviable position of needing jobs, schools. My wife is an educator, and my son was in third grade at the time, and housing. And my sister-in-law had talked to the principal at her school and said that the principal was willing to hold a spot for our son. So we came over to Kennesaw, Georgia from Memphis on October 1st. And my son enrolled in elementary school up in Kennesaw. My wife and I and our son also lived with my sister-in-law and her husband for better part of a year, almost a year.
Wow.
And that was intense times, adjusting to, having a winter.
Right, yeah.
And adjusting to being here. I was interested in working with this guitarist named Chris Piskin. And Chris had come down to New Orleans to try out for Pleasure Club. And he was really good, but not perhaps the best match for that band.
Okay.
But him and Grant had bonded, and he and I had bonded. He was a young guy. So we got to working pretty rapidly after I got to Kennesaw. And he had a friend, and Bruce had a friend in Marietta. And so they'd drive up to Marietta. I'd drive down to Kennesaw, and we'd start working. And we really basically started that way. We started working and recording on that stuff.
Okay.
Bruce was playing bass at that particular point and recording everything. And in fact, on one of the excursions there, Hours was in town. And so Hours came by, and they came by the studio and recorded some. And that was really just a really interesting time to be in a basement in Kennesaw, and then Trill trying to kind of put stuff together and work and do this. Our record came out maybe in 2007 or so, initially in 2007. And it was strong too as well, but it was an entirely different thing. And I do think that the mood of Katrina is definitely indelibly on that record. And, but it was a good band. And so we did a number of records that way. And we were working with Chris a bunch. Chris would have like a song or a musical statement, and then we'd work with it. But it was pretty open-ended. And I was starting to get into more directly collaborative work at that particular point.
You mentioned Katrina, and I know that had a huge impact on so many people. Did it? And besides the physical damage that it did, and the displacement of the hundreds of thousands of people, did it affect the way you approach music at all? Did it affect either songwriting or the way you collaborate with anybody?
It did. And I'll say this. I mean, what happened is that I had been on meds for and seeing a therapist for anxiety and depression.
Okay.
And the mental hospital that I was going to get these meds from and stuff like that flooded. And so that wasn't going to be possible anymore.
Right.
And so I knew that no matter how I felt about it, I wasn't going to really have access to Lexapro where we were. And so I started journaling, and not that journaling is a substitution for people who need SSRIs, but when I went to journaling, it dawned on me that the function of good mental health medication is to create support for healthy thought processes. almost the same way you'd put a cast for a broken arm.
Okay.
Just to where the thought processes flow through the brain in a more healthy, balanced manner.
Okay.
I know that I'm getting into bad shape when, as opposed to the thoughts flowing through in a maybe curvy, if not linear fashion, that they become spirals. They become repeating thoughts for me.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
and so it did dawn on me that at that particular point that mental health, good mental health, like anything, was a sacrifice. So it was going to cost me money, or time, or attention, or intention, or a consideration. Good mental health care was going to cost me something. Good health itself is a sacrifice.
Right.
And it's a sacrifice that I've learned is really worthwhile over time. But initially, I didn't really know quite what I was going to do. And of course, that particular medication, you go off of it hardcore. Just the synapses are firing, and you kind of like feel like you got these electrical shocks going on in your head.
Oh, wow.
And then that, with all of the stuff that was going on with Katrina, but it gave me a chance to actually really understand that the world is always changing.
Yeah.
And so the natural flow of a river is not one direction on a given curve. Rivers over their lifespan, they'll move left, they'll move right, they'll swing, they'll arc, they'll bend, they'll do all manner of different things over their lifespan because that's the natural flow of water. And so for me to see my life as, well, this is the way that people are supposed to be. This is the way that the world is supposed to act. This is what is supposed to happen. That in me needed to be smashed. If I couldn't smash it, I wouldn't be happy.
Wow.
And then, and I started having a look at, okay, well, what degree of sickness and ego and suffering was I creating at that particular point? I was 38. So I wasn't an old man necessarily, but
right.
But I started, thinking that, like, in terms of creating a impossible dynamic in the bands that I'd been in before, I'd done it in terms of trying to control others or attract, attention to what I'm doing. None of it made me one iota happier. And there's a Fugazi song, "You can't be what you were, so you better start being who you are."
Yep.
I hated it. But in that moment, it dawned on me that I was no longer going to be able to continue to be who I'd been before. And it didn't matter because all the evidence of what I'd done over the years was gone anyway.
Right.
All the interviews, all the attention, all the British press, all that shit was gone. So with all of that evidence of what I'd been up till now, either in a landfill or in the Gulf of Mexico somewhere,
Yeah.
who am I going to be now? Because if I had so identified with myself as the singer, as the front man, as the musician, as the dynamic, who am I going to be now? Got no skills. Got no job. Don't have housing. Who am I going to be? And I didn't really know who I was going to be after Katrina, not right away. But I knew that I wanted to put joy at a higher priority. I wanted to put awareness at a higher priority. I wanted to put usefulness at a higher priority. I wanted to put loving and kind and receptive at a higher priority in my life. Healing. I wanted to be that too. And so, I started doing the reading and some of the work in terms of owning up to my part in the suffering that I helped create by needing fame, by needing money, by needing all of these things that were not really making me one bit happier.
Right.
And so I started looking into the work of presence, which Eckhart Tolle talks greatly about in Power of Now. I started reading Conversation with God, some of the Marianne Williamson stuff, the Pema Chodron stuff, Deepak Chopra. I mean, like, I was kind of going for anything that was kind of more of a spiritual nature.
Okay.
That was really speaking to me more than, well, if they just fucking do what I tell them to play, everything would be fine.
Right.
And then I started understanding other musicians more acutely. In the Futura Bold, which you mentioned, playing with Bruce was an eye-opener. Bruce plays out all the mistakes. So he rehearses, and there's mistakes and clams all over the place. And he does that until those are distilled. And what he's left with is a good performance.
Okay.
And I'd never met anybody like that in my life, but I never left room for anybody like that in my life. It was always, this is how you do it. This is how I learned it. So this is how it is. And when I began to accept that people learn music very, very, very differently from me, at that point, I was able to actually understand, okay, this is how you can work with somebody else. This is how you can collaborate.
Wow.
So that, and then, kind of the other thing, there's so many things that changed about how I viewed life after Katrina too as well. It's like, okay, well, if the elements of life are always changing, if, the waters in the creek are always moving fast, how can I have any peace? I'm terrified and anxious, how can I have any peace? And the only way that I knew that I could have peace was just that if I put my foot out across the water, that a stone would be there to meet it. Just knowing that. And I'm not worried about 3 or 4 steps ahead of me. Okay. I'm just getting myself, concerned over that I can reach 1 foot to the stone.
Wow.
And so I started living more like that. And, it took a while to really get journaling to be habitual, but in doing so, I found that there's some benefit to me for it. And my mom would argue that it's probably better for you than any of the SSRIs or the mental health medication that they put you on. But for my own part, I've learned that I don't agonize over lyrics quite like I used to.
Oh, okay.
Well, if you've already run a mile on Monday and somebody asked you to do a 50-yard sprint, it's not going to be a problem.
Right.
Yeah. It'll be easy by comparison, right?
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing with journaling every day. I found that I am more inclined to be inspired than not because I'm willing to journal.
Wow.
And then it's also kind of helped me deal with fears or idle thoughts or whatever. It's just, I've learned to square off with a negative thought or negative emotion and kind of just put it down, and it doesn't take ownership.
I can understand that. That makes sense to me.
And it helped me get over myself about, day jobs and stuff. Because I remember telling myself, this job is killing me. And I was hearing myself say that in New Orleans, especially at a point where Grant and my relationship was contentious, and I was doing some sort of renovation work for an investment house in New Orleans.
Okay.
And I heard myself say, this job's killing me. And of late, or not long after that, after Katrina, my attitude was that this job is bringing needed money into my household to help pay for school uniforms, help pay for shoes, put gas in the car, and to teach me needed skills. And so my rhetoric, my story, my suffering went from this job is killing me to this job is providing needed money and economic health to my family and showing me life skills.
You know, that's amazing.
And then here's the other thing is that, you know, I had, like many musicians, working in food service or swinging a hammer or whatever we're doing. We have the rhetoric that the story that says, they're not paying me enough for this shit. And then I started changing it. I said, they are paying me enough for this shit. And it wasn't long before I started feeling it. You know, it's like, hey, they are paying me enough for this shit. And then it was like, they are paying me enough for this work, for this value work. And then, you know, I got myself into a point where I was asking, okay, money or value? Money or value? Well, I know that working for money in and of itself is not something I can endorse. Would never encourage anybody to do that. But I started applying myself to value. And I thought, and I asked myself, okay, well, if I apply myself to work for value, is it possible that I will look back on my life having never become a slave to money? And I say that with a caveat that even some of the things that I enjoy cost money.
Right.
You know, I like good food, just like anybody.
Yeah.
Even the things that I love, that I value, cost me money. But I realize that, you know, at this point in time, I'll be a bitch for value. I don't mind it. But money has its limits. And I know that, you know, there's certain capitalist modeling that'll say that, oh, well, everybody has their price. But the litmus test is, and I ask people all the time, I ask them, what amount of money could you throw at a toxic relationship and everything would be peaceful and kumbaya?
There is none.
So money, though powerful and a tool, has its limits.
Very true. Very true.
And the more I became aware of that, the more it was easy to get on board with my own work for value. You know, so if I'm an economist, I'm a behavioral economist, I guess. But I started, you know, I've had a number of different opportunities to learn and relearn this lesson. Do you work for money? Do you work for value? And I found that working for value works better for me.
This is a very timely conversation, and I thank you. It's kind of it's making me think a lot.
You know, when certain things happen in the workspace, and, you know, there's the invariable indignities and getting thrown under the bus and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there does come a point where you can say, okay, do I go back to the old job that I had? Do I go, you know, elsewhere? It's like, well, fuck you, I'm going to go work for him.
Yeah.
You know, or do I get to a point where I'm actually aware enough, present enough, in order to actually ask myself, okay, do I like the nature of the work I'm currently doing now, or do I like what I was doing 8 years ago? And at that point, the answer is simple. I love the nature of the work that I'm doing right now. No argument.
Okay.
And, you know, and this job is supporting me. This job is offering me opportunities and, you know, financial benefits and also freedoms that come with that and sometimes without that. So I had to, you know, remember that while I was learning, you know, how to do residential wiring, or while I was learning how to do, you know, like finished carpentry or framing or whatever, that there's a point to me learning that. And the point to learning that was to help me become less of a slave to money, but a willing bitch for value.
I like it. I have been going back and listening to Futura Bold and The Steady Wicked.
Yeah.
And I got to say, this is War EP. Well, first of all, I did a little digging on YouTube, and I did see this amazing live studio performance you guys did with Futura Bold, where you played like Euroskank.
Yep. For the Riches.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I like Euroskank on the album, but that live performance is even better.
It's wild.
I love that.
Yeah. And that's, that's who we were. And that, getting a live band to come alive on record is a big challenge in the music industry.
Right.
We're not the only ones, but that's something that is often elusive. But no, that particular live performance that was shot in Athens.
Okay.
And, that was a really cool day.
Both tracks were fantastic, but Euroskank is my favorite. That was just
that's great.
Just the power coming out of the guitar and your vocals, and it was just it was just amazing.
Yes, and that's and that was not atypical of working with Chris. Chris would have kind of like a musical kind of idea pulled together, and then I just like, okay, well, the chorus seems like it's saying Euroskank. I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, I don't even know, And then, we kind of developed the chorus of like, Euroskank, you may never be a star, but you look so good when you crash your car.
I love that line.
And then, and then build it from there. And then a lot of like, if you got a good chorus, you got something to work with.
Well, that whole song it just came together fantastically, and that especially in that live performance, it was.
Yeah.
I think.
I'll have to look at that again.
Oh yeah, I think that's actually my favorite track on that album is Euroskank. But the EP you did a few years after that, This Is War.
Yeah. That's
even heavier. That is amazing. I mean, it sounds kind of like Soundgarden got funky or something. I don't know.
You said you can't get up today. And it's too late to straighten the mess you made. If there's a chance to start all over, well, you choose it all the same. Clouds form as you make your way through the alleys and the city gate.
And even your vocals are just a little different than what I was used to. Your approach was different from Pleasure Club and your early solo stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and that was songs were taking shape in a different way, and that's got like "Let Love Find You" overthrown on it. That's got
"This Is War," which is a great.
This Is War on it too as well. Yeah.
We Shoot Golden.
We Shoot Golden. That's another example of Chris and I working well together. Chris passed on in 2014. He died from I guess it's cardiac endocarditis.
Wow.
And so we lost him.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So We Shoot Golden was another example of that, of it. Like, okay, we shoot golden. What does that mean? I don't know. We shoot golden. But then, when I started kind of building the verses for it, it's like, if you're tired of bully boys, you smile sincere as they take your choice. Look to us. You have a choice. We shoot golden. The doctor's saying that you won't heal. The medication makes you ill. We'll give you something you can really feel. We shoot golden.
If you're haunted by bully boys who smile sincere as they take
it's almost like it's an advertising pitch.
Right.
And like in the way of like dirty deeds done dirt cheap. If, you know, you're having trouble with your, you know, high school jock or whatever, we do dirty deeds done dirt cheap.
Right.
Call us, you know, one call, that's all. And I like how songs can be like advertising slogans, but that's what We Shoot Golden is.
I think Shallow Water might be, I don't know, it's like nothing I've ever really heard before. It's kind of like...
Yeah, that was actually from a dream.
Really?
I dreamed that there was all of this shouting in this song called Shallow. This is shallow water. It's shallow water. And so we just started that. We started that with vocals. We didn't really have any musical ideas for it right off the bat.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, my young son's on there, and one of his buddies on there in the chorus and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, it's kind of a crazy song, but I would say that would certainly be a more roots influence. And you know, I've really never spent any time with Soundgarden at all, but I've come to really appreciate them and their legacy. And I did have a dream that I was headed to a festival with Chris and this spring, and we're driving in a passenger van to this festival, and that he seemed really good. He just seemed at peace, and he was kind of joking and kind of had a certain how would I say it? Just a very, very, very relaxed approach to getting up and doing a show with a bunch of songs that people were looking forward to hearing. And it felt good to have that dream, because it was a deeply troubling death for me. And shocking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, when people like talk about, you know, what are you known for? It's like, well, I do alternative rock, I guess, what would it be called? You know, well, who are your peers? I was like, well, you know, my bandmates are my peers, but you know, over the years, it was, you know, Jane's Addiction and Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and, you know, Morphine and so many, Jeff Buckley, and so many of these great musicians are no longer with us.
Yeah. They
didn't make
it. It's amazing. It's very sad when I think about how many have lost, and you know, through not just through addictions and things, you know, accidents.
Yeah.
It's just
Vic Chestnut.
Yeah.
Sparkle Horse.
Yeah.
I mean, just mental illness, death, institution, Old Dirty Bastard. I mean, like, Old Dirty Bastard's my age. You know, he's my peer.
Yeah.
And I think the only time he had sober since he was a little kid was when he was incarcerated.
Jeez.
You know, and there's a lot of collateral damage. I met his son. There's just a lot of collateral damage.
Wow.
Yeah. That comes as a result of mental illness and addiction.
Well, you picked up with another band, The Steady Wicked, which has a different sound again from Futura Bold.
Well, Steady Wicked was interesting because, I mean, in some respects, we kind of formed so we could do shows with hours.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
Somewhat. I mean, like, we wanted to do something that we could put together ad hoc pretty quick. And for our first shows that we were doing stuff, we were just bringing our guitars up to Nashville to open for hours or whatever to play a show.
Oh, cool.
And we were doing it because we had songs that we really enjoyed playing and we really believed in. And so, of course, we have amplifiers now and we have all that other stuff. But it was, you know, some of the first opportunities that we said yes to was to getting out of town and getting a chance to play with other bands that we liked. And I mean, I'll tell you, Jimmy, like, if it wasn't for my friendship with Jimmy, I wouldn't play near as much. So, and especially during the years of, post Katrina.
Yeah.
My gosh, talk about chaos.
Yeah. I can't imagine. We moved up to Virginia shortly after that. And, like I said, we weren't hit very hard by Katrina at all down where I lived in Alabama. So, we escaped it. But
Yeah.
we were on the periphery, so we could see what was going on. People were coming from out of, from New Orleans our way, and Houston, and up through Mississippi. It's just.
Now, where were you in Alabama?
I was southeast, so where Panama City Beach is in Florida.
Yep.
I lived exactly, I think, 90 miles due north of that.
Okay.
So I was in a little town called Level Plains, but it was right outside of the Fort Rucker military base.
Okay.
6 miles from the gate. So it was a little bit west of Dothan.
Oh, yeah. I know Dothan. Op.
Yep. Oh, yeah. I used to go through Op to go to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sold insurance in Op.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good place to sell insurance.
Yeah. You've never sold insurance in Op, have you?
No, I guess whether somebody has experience or not. Clearly, this gentleman has never sold insurance in Op.
Yeah.
That's kind of the litmus test of whether what he has to say is any weight or not.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see if he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's never sold insurance in Op. If you sold insurance in Op, you've got a leg to stand on.
That was my job, and I barely sold any insurance in Op.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. You were supposed to, and you barely did a good job of that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I started changing after Katrina, and my relationship with alcohol ended in 2006. And I was, the behaviors of those around me were starting to trouble me. And I knew that my own relationship with alcohol was to numb negative emotions, negative feelings. And if I didn't want to feel like the ultimate loser, I would drink.
Right.
And then I stopped. And if, at this point now, it's a few years on now. And if alcohol could deepen my awareness and presence, I'd start tomorrow. My experience of alcohol, though, is that it does the opposite for me. It numbs me out. It kind of takes me out of the moment. Gets me thinking about something that I got no business thinking about, i.e. something I think I might be able to have control over, and I don't.
Okay.
And so that's no longer part of my life, but I'm still working at presence. I'm still working at removing things that, or put it this way, not even removing things so much, but having a look at these things. Okay, does this serve me? In what capacity is it serving me right now? Am I learning? Is it time to let go?
Okay. Just
getting myself to that place. And that's helpful when we put it this way, it's been helpful for me when I get to that place where it's like, I'm ready to let this go now.
Yeah.
It can be very, very presence giving. So, I've been looking at housing. So I moved out from my marital home in 2019. My ex-wife filed for divorce in October of 2020. It was finalized in November of 2020. And yet, that's a relationship that started in 1990. So it's a 30-year relationship. And so there's no real easy way out.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I'm scarred or damaged goods or anything like that. It just means that, in order for me to keep myself and to take care of myself, I've got to do it with all of my faculty. And, I know relationships are tough no matter what. The honeymoon, phase of a relationship is the bait and switch.
Yeah.
But at this point right now, my son is refusing communication.
Oh,
and and my wife, when I'm asking for communication, it's not been a good exchange with her. And so I'm relegated to spending time meditating on the gratitude that I have for ever even having had the chance to get married, the gratitude for ever even having had the chance to change my son's diapers, to raise him, to introduce him to music, to care for him, to love him, to play with him.
Yeah.
And so that's where I want to be. I want to be there to where I'm open and have a lot of gratitude and a lot of joy in my life, a lot of levity. So, yes, these are tough things. It's not over. You know, in some respects, the effects of Katrina are still rippling out. They have long-reaching ramifications, even though, you know, so far as the shock and the loss of everything, I'm 16 years over it at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a lot of people are, you know, I don't understand how could you lose all of that and be okay? Well, you know, I'm aware that if I didn't feel I had access to my own happiness, I'd be a lot worse off.
Yeah.
You know, if I didn't feel like I had access to my own sense of accomplishment, my own sense of integrity, and then I would be a lot less happy,
Okay.
a lot less joyous. So, you know, that it's possible to have the experience. Katrina was a great teachable moment for me. It gave me the experience of being able to see how one can experience catastrophic loss on one hand and the loss of nothing of consequence on the other hand.
Okay.
Those two truths can exist simultaneously. And, you know, and it dawned on me that, you know, loss is a consolation prize of no longer being a teenager. If you're going to, you know, if you're going to ascend into your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense. You're going to lose people and items and things and property and all, you know, work, jobs, whatever. You're going to lose things that you'd prefer not to have to say goodbye to.
Yeah.
Well, in the same kind of thing that I was talking about, the world always changing, and well, then how can I have any peace if that's the case? And I think the only thing that really makes any sense to me is just for me to be grateful for ever even having had a home in New Orleans to begin with.
Okay.
A record collection.
Yeah.
For ever even having had a home in the Uptown District with hardwood floors. For ever even having had enough toys for my son to play with. You know?
Right.
So, I mean, gratitude for even that which I would not want creates an opportunity.
Wow.
And it's only when I can be grateful for that which I would not want can I see the opportunity in it.
Wow.
But I don't want to go back to being who I was.
Well, you seem to have a very grounded, healthy approach to things.
Well, I accept, you know, I've learned that when I argue with reality doesn't get hurt about that, doesn't have any hurt feelings over it. I'm the one that gets hurt.
True. Very true. So is that part of what created the change in the sound of the music especially with the Steady Wicked?
I would think that the change is a byproduct of my variance of approach. So in other words, I didn't change the music in any conscious way.
Okay.
I changed.
Freedom is the sound. Oh, come on and play the music. Let's just fall into it. Make me your believer tonight. Well, I'm caught up in the spirit. As long as I can hear it, I know that I'll be feeling alright. Well, you and me,
like, okay, well, the event of Katrina was 16 years ago yesterday, but I have to kind of take in everything that has changed over the years. And it was a little bit tough yesterday because I was thinking about, okay, well, this is kind of a time where certain things that I was willing to ignore were really, really hard for me to ignore. This is where some of my own poor behavior was really hard to reconcile with. And, when I was thinking, and yesterday I was thinking about all of the things that have happened for my son, my wife, and I. And, I'm where I need to be. I don't feel that, I should be elsewhere. I should be doing something else. I should be back with my wife or anything. I don't feel like that. I believe that if that is what's supposed to happen, it will be absolutely clear to me.
Okay. Yeah.
But, in terms of moving back into a toxic dynamic, I can't see how that would be good for me.
Right.
I already have a propensity for making concessions to please others and then get butthurt when things don't go my way, or butthurt when, my own needs aren't communicated or met, or put it this way, my own needs aren't met after being communicated. Don't feel, don't talk, don't trust, help me survive childhood. So there's a survival tools. Don't feel, don't talk, don't trust, but they wreak havoc on every important adult relationship I've tried to have.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, if that's what you grew up with, that's hard to break.
It's hard to break, but in my case, it's part of who I want to be, is to have those patterns broken.
Okay.
Yeah. Learning to trust, learning to feel, learning to communicate. And, and all of those things are relatable and important in relationships. Being able to communicate emotion. I feel this, not I feel like, I feel this.
That's a big distinction, too.
It's a big distinction. Feel like is a thought. And being willing to communicate, to name an emotion, to be able to allow myself to feel sad, allow myself to feel happy, proud, and to be able to be a good communicator too,
Well, and
then also to learn to trust that I am being taken care of.
Yeah.
As long as I select something that is rooted in integrity at some level, I'm going to be more than taken care of.
Are you working on new material? Because the last thing I'm looking at with The Steady Wicked, the album come out in 2016?
So yeah, we're working on new songs going in. We're taking a break until October, I think, but we've got, we got to decide whether we're doing a acoustic record or an electric record.
Okay.
And, that's been rewarding too as well. Bruce kind of saying, okay, well, we got both, so, okay, we have to decide which songs are going to make it on the acoustic record, which is going to make it the electric record. And the acoustic records have been really enjoyable to make too as well, just because they're challenging, because you're working with sparse, bare bones kind of stuff. But at the same time, if we're capturing a good performance, it could be just powerful as anything that I've done electric. So that's been good. I mean, and I've worked all through the pandemic because my yoga studio, as soon as they opened back up, they said, well, okay, we want to do live music again. So I started playing once a month at minimum at the yoga studio.
Awesome.
And that's just been great.
That is awesome.
So
I never thought of live music in a yoga studio.
Well, this particular practice does have several nights a week a yin practice, which is really, really slowed down postures, slowed down movements. It's really going deep into the muscle tissue, the connective tissue, and the ligaments and cartilage, bringing blood flow to those areas across 2 to 5 minute poses. So the songs that I write, which are mostly 2 to 5 minutes, are great context for a practice like this.
Okay.
And so, the instructor will give her their posture and kind of help people ease into it. And then I'll begin a song and play it through. And then when the song completes, she'll bring them out of that posture and move elsewhere.
Okay. But so you're not playing like Permanent Solution or Illingness?
No. I've played Illingness before, but not at like live volume level. It's on an acoustic and it's in the room. But I'll play. I found that a number of songs where I am and work pretty well there. So cool. Even if it renders as a live wire act song, the lyric content for this stuff works and applies in a number of different ways. So I'm really kind of glad about that too.
I have kept you for quite a long time here. I think we're running on like 3 hours almost at this point.
Okay.
But thank you so much for spending so much time with me and talking about your career and all. This has really been wonderful.
Oh man, thank you. And part of I feel good knowing that some of what I had to share at some level you felt that you needed to hear, and that agrees with my desire to feel useful.
Oh well,
and to live within some manner of intention. Not that that I'm supposed to get out there on the roadside and start helping people, but that if some of the things that have occurred to me over the years can be helpful to somebody else, that's perfect for me. I have a friend that years ago, he said this, like, man, I can't wait till the good Lord takes me out into the ministry and I can go out and I can be preaching and praising God. And, he's working at Delta. I said, you're working at Delta, right? He's like, yeah. So you're no longer the youngest guy there, right? He's like, no, I've been there over 20 years. Okay. Well, have you ever thought that maybe you're supposed to be a Delta?
Yeah.
I was like, how do you figure that? He's like, well, I said, there's a lot of young guys coming in as mechanics, coming in from mechanic school, and they're living alone and they don't talk to anybody. And maybe the only encouraging thing they heard this week came from you.
Wow. Yeah.
You're having an effect on those around you.
Yeah.
Whether you choose to recognize it or not. And that is some of the work that we're talking about too.
Yeah.
There are people, I don't know where you work. Are you the youngest guy still on?
Not even close. Not even close.
So some of what you have to share and some of the encouragement you have to offer may be the kindest thing that some of the staff hears all month.
I hadn't looked at it like that.
Well, you don't know their home life situations.
Exactly. That's very true.
And some of these kids are living in ways that you and me couldn't deal with.
Right.
And so, having somebody who is older kind of say, no, so I'm really, really glad you're here. I'm glad you think about it this way. I'm glad you approach it differently. Makes it kind of wild and exciting and kind of cool or whatever it is,
Yeah.
And, it can have a rippling out effect that's really good in the world, especially with, people feeling alone all the time.
Yeah. And this past year has just amplified that.
Feeling isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a point sometimes to even the work that we're not really certain we're a good fit for.
Yeah. That's true.
When I came to Books for Africa, I wasn't certain I was a good fit for it. Why? Because I'm a white suburban male,
yeah,
among other things, right? Who thought of Africa as a single location, a single entity.
Yeah.
No, I knew that there were countries there, but still, contextually, we think of, so many Americans. I was just I'm thinking about Africa as one, kind of landmass.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's 55 sovereign countries. replete with their own tribal systems and their own languages and their own cultures. So are there similarities between some of them? Yeah, but it's not identical by any stretch.
Exactly. No, no more than in our own country, things in Florida aren't the same as things in Colorado.
Right.
By any stretch of the imagination. Right. Books for Africa. What do you do there? What does that do? How does that work?
Well, we were started in 88 when our founder, who was retired from publishing himself, traveled to Uganda. And when he got to Uganda, he couldn't find books anywhere. What little that was left behind was falling apart from the 20s and 30s from the British Council.
Oh, wow.
When Idi Amin declared the presidential win in 1971, one of the first things that he did was had his henchmen rake all the books out of the schools and libraries and set fire to them.
Wow.
And then the other thing he did was he gave anybody born of either Asian or Indian descent 90 days to pack up their family and to get out of Uganda.
Wow.
So in those two actions, he created a society that values two things: the almighty shilling and the almighty bullet.
Yeah.
And if you weren't born with either a military legacy family or you weren't born with like serious money in Uganda, the door to your education was closed.
Wow.
And so the first books that Tom, our founder, set about sending was in 1988. And the kids were so excited to receive their first books in Jinja, Uganda. They were picking them up by the pages, having never seen humans hold a book before.
Wow. Oh, my gosh.
Now, conversely, America doesn't struggle for books. America struggles to value books. America will garbage 322 million books this year. We are sending 1/100th of what gets garbaged in America on an annual basis.
Wow.
When people ask me what I'm doing there at Books for Africa, I say, like me, you got a birthday twin in all 55 African countries. I don't care what God you subscribe to. That's a fact. It's Statistics 101.
Yep.
Whose life and years looks entirely different than yours and mine does. Is it possible that even one book in his or her hands could make a valid difference?
Absolutely.
Well, let's just start there. And so it becomes empowerment because, it doesn't matter what anybody's like into, what they're crazy about or hip to or what they enjoy. It's really of little consequence, as long as the kids love it.
Yeah.
The coursework for pediatric nursing is tough no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Is your daughter studying anatomy and physiology?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one semester of trying to memorize every system, every item on the human body.
Yep.
And then the next semester of trying to apply all of it. So it's tough coursework, but it's so no matter what, you can't just it's never going to be able to be easily handed over, right? But giving kids the tools that they need to succeed, that's worth doing.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a guitar, guitar playing. I read an interview with King Sunny Ade in probably 1983, 85, because, I had one Guitar Player magazine with Angus Young on the cover, and I read everything in it.
Right.
Everything in it, all the articles and stuff like that. But I didn't hear his music for another 38 years.
Oh, wow.
No. Yeah. I heard his influence in the Talking Heads and other things that were kind of, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in general, I didn't really hear him until years and years later. But I think that music and human interests are so wide and varied and long-reaching that it can work the world over. And so when people ask me, would you send a book about Jimi Hendrix to a kid in Nigeria? I said, absolutely, I would. Because if there was one of me growing up in Tennessee, there's 200 million Nigerians in 2021, someone there is going crazy for guitar.
Oh, yeah.
I have to believe that.
Well, James, like I said, I have kept you for so long. How can people follow the music? How can they learn more about Books for Africa and keep it up with you?
Books for Africa is its own entity, and that is it's booksforafrica.org. And then James Hall is his own entity. Pretty much down to James Hall's pretty much down to one person now. But I actually do have a jameshall.com, and that has a lot of music at it. And someone recently ordered a bunch, so I occasionally get the ping when somebody orders a bunch of the music off. So that's cool. And I'm vying to get everything I've done pressed and released on vinyl.
Oh.
Why? Because I like looking at the artwork.
Oh, yes.
And I have a great appreciation for the vinyl experience. I don't have a turntable right now. Everything I've got is pretty much digitized or digital or pixelated at this point.
Yeah.
However, I have bought records that I only listen to digitally, but I like it because I have the artwork.
Yes.
The album is the genuine article.
It is. That's the only problem I have. I don't mind digital downloads, but I don't feel like I own it, and I'm not going to stare at my computer and look at a JPEG while I'm listening to it.
No, it's not the same thing.
Nope.
And
not even close.
But yeah, somebody did put out in Britain, and it's hard to find, but you can find the occasional My Love, Sex, and Spirit with the lizard and stuff on it. I gotta try to find that, because I thought that artwork was amazing. I've got, like I said, I got the Damon one. My friend's not giving up his, so. Yeah. Yeah, so that's out there, but none of the Pleasure Club stuff is on vinyl. And so, yeah, we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
I don't know how many records I've done yet, but I've done a few. And I still feel good. I still feel all right, Good. Still live to tell about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, Mark, I appreciate the time with you tonight.
Well,
really
thank you so much. I appreciate it as well. It's been a wonderful conversation, and it's, like I said, very timely for a lot of what we talked about. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
No, I'm not a victim. No, not anymore. I seen all the warnings I chose to ignore. I wrote to knock it. I opened up my door. My friend came to see me just the other day. He closed all the curtains. He took out a game. He set the board and showed